Look at me walking in, it's Multiplier. In today's video, I shall explain compression with the use of visual aids and this game from Sound Gym called Compressionist, which is a great way to tune your ears into the sound of compression and how each of the main parameters affect it. In the game, you first of all hear some compressed drums, and then you have to decide which settings created this. As you try the various options, you're hearing the result in real time. For example, do we use the faster attack time or the slower attack time to create those drums? Yay, 10 points, well not 10 points for me, this number of points. It's a game. The more you play, the harder it gets and the more points you get, but more about that soon. Let's focus on the compression here. There are three primary controls in this game: ratio, attack time, and makeup gain. Let's start with the most important, the one most used in the earlier levels: attack time. To understand this, we need to understand what a compressor is. Think of it this way. A compressor's just a volume control. Imagine having your hand on the volume control, turning it down and turning it back up. That's all a compressor's doing. And by doing this, we can change the shape of a waveform, the amplitude, the dynamic. Think of it visually. In fact, you can see it on the screen now. This is the original, this compressed with the fast attack time, and this compressed with the slow attack time. Can you see how it's changed the shape of the waveform? By changing the volume over time, we can change the way a waveform looks, effectively how compressed it is, in one or two ways, either making it fatter or more plucky. Let me show this visually here in real time. So look at the GR meter here. This is showing literally in real time how the compressor is turning it down. When the meter goes down, the volume's been turned down, and when the meter pops back up, the volume returns to normal. You can see the gain reduction meter in the game here. If you can't see the meter flashing there, make sure you're using Chrome and not Safari. So that meter is showing the compressor turning the volume down and releasing it back to normal. Here we see the same thing in a different way. That GR trace, that orange line, that gain reduction trace, showing the change in volume. The volume being reduced and then returning back to normal. But why is it doing this? Simplistically, as the sound goes above the threshold, the compressor turns it down according to the ratio. So the higher the ratio, the more it gets turned down. And the attack time determines how long it takes to get to that full compression. Here the threshold's the blue line. Can you see how the compressor compresses when our input sound, the grey outline, is above the threshold? And the compressor stops compressing when the input drops below the threshold? See how the gain reduction occurs, the orange line, only when the input's above the threshold? Only when that grey input is above that blue threshold line. The attack time is how long it takes the compressor to react. And so if you imagine the compressor wanting to do 10 dB of gain reduction, if the attack time is 50 milliseconds, it takes 50 milliseconds to reach that full 10 dB of gain reduction. Get in there linearly, so it takes 50 milliseconds to go from 0 dB of gain reduction to 10 dB of gain reduction. See if you can see this visually with the fast versus slow attack time. The attack time is how long it takes to reach the full amount of gain reduction. Now, either you can think about this visually. Imagine, say, being a compressor and compressing this original sound. Imagine if you had a slow attack time or an infinitely fast attack time. How would you compress this sound? Or I suppose you can just remember, a fast attack time creates a thicker sound, but a slow attack time creates a more plucky sound. It's an important point here, in fact, a very important point, and that is makeup gain. This has had makeup gain, whereas this didn't need it. After compression with this fast attack time, we get this from the original. To see why, imagine being a compressor, reacting immediately to the sound, compressing it immediately, reacting infinitely fast. But of course, now I have room to turn it up, and we call this makeup gain. That is how a fast attack time creates a thicker sound. In the game, we set this makeup gain manually, listening to the compressed version and setting the volume of our version manually, so it's about the same level of loudness, roughly anyway. In the real world, quote unquote, we sometimes see an automatic makeup gain option. However, it never works very well. In fact, it never works, basically. It's technically based on something called RMS, or a version of it. RMS isn't well defined, it varies. Not to mention it's only roughly RMS, but anyway, that's a technical detail I won't go into now. Do some course on Groove 3 for the full story about that. I find this best understood visually. Imagine being a compressor, reacting to the sound. What do you do with a fast attack versus a slow attack? Now, if it hasn't quite clicked yet, play the game, and after only 10 or 15 minutes or so, believe me, it'll start to make sense. Even if you don't understand how a compressor is compressing, play the game and you'll get a feeling for it, for what a fast attack time does versus a slow attack time. The binary choice in the game makes it much easier to hear the difference. And so, what about ratio? Think of ratio as an amount control. Effectively, the higher the ratio, the more compression happens. Simplistically, 8 to 1 does twice the compression of 4 to 1. 4 to 1 does twice the compression of 2 to 1. Whether you're making it fatter or more plucky, the higher the ratio, the more compression happens. The higher the ratio, the fatter it'll be, or the pluckier it'll be. So the attack time determines if you're making it fatter or more plucky, and the ratio controls how much so. As you can see on screen, the higher the ratio, the bigger the effect, whatever that effect is. Now, it's not that this shape is better than this one, or that this is better than this one. They're just different. Compression is simply a tool to turn one thing to something else. In some tracks, this will be better. In some tracks, this better. In some tracks, the original was best. Compression is simply a tool to make things fatter or more plucky. That's it. To get better at hearing this, so we can make better decisions about the shape of the waveform, we can use the game. There are all these different levels, each level getting progressively harder. So it builds you in gradually. To pass a level, you need to get 8 right, and you've only got 3 lives. No, and you get a big red if you get it wrong. It's quite disappointing when that happens. Fail 3 times, you have to restart the level. There's something about the gamified nature of this, and the fact you only normally have 2 choices, that makes you just listen harder, more critically to the sound. The back-to-back listening between, say, 2 different attack times allows you to better hear the dynamic. In the first 40 minutes or so, I got to this level here, putting me in this percentile. But I mean, I've been doing this 10, 11, 10, some large number of years. I think I've been doing this 10 years now, so I mean, it's pretty well tuned. Thought I'd best stop at this level, didn't want to break the internet. How many points can you get? Now, to play this game, you do need the Pro membership. The free plan only gives you access to 3 of the 16 games. This is my favorite of the free games. It's an EQ peak filter game. But as I'm sure you can imagine, the best games are on the Pro plan, for example, Compressionist. Not to mention on the free plan, you're limited in how often you can play the games, only about once a day or so. Therefore, if you're interested, I highly recommend the Pro plan, which you can get 30% off using the link in the description below. At least the first 50 people can. My name is Multiplier. Catch you in the next one.